So I'm going to show you just a few techniques when you get to the relief carving about some of the tools that you can use. And the most important thing to remember is that you want to take away the material really slowly, right? So you don't want to go for like big chunks of the material at a time. You can see that I've kind of sketched out my rough design on a couple of my sides of the block just to kind of remind myself of what I need to take away. This design, like I did this with Sharpie and it kind of stayed a little bit on the paraffin wax. It's not great, right? It kind of is loose, but it's just a guideline, right? So you should also have your more three-dimensional sketches kind of out and about near you just to kind of get that visual, right? So this is the dimensions that I posted on the PowerPoint presentation are the same dimensions for most of these blocks. Now you can see that like where you snap them off, you might lose a little bit. So, you know, it is what it is kind of thing. If you do want to use both blocks for like the same one, you could always kind of combine them together afterwards or just kind of like split them in half and kind of put them back together later, put them back together in the beginning and kind of work all in one block, but I'll leave that up to you. If you do end up going through both blocks and, you know, something happens, I do have some extra ones that you guys can use, right? So, you know, it's not the end of the world if you go through both blocks and it's not quite what you want, but you should have a couple tools. Now, I brought a brush just to kind of sweep out any of the excess, like, falling material, but you can also just kind of tap it or shake it. You should also have a needle tool, right? This is going to be really good for just, like, carving fine details a little bit later, and or if you need to like refine, you can dip it in hot water or just over a little bit of a flame. I have like a little candle here just to kind of smooth stuff out. You should also have a ribbon tool. This is going to be good for kind of taking away bigger chunks of material, and you should have an assortment of just like wood carving tools. This wax, as you can see, not wood carving tools, clay tools. It's really easy, right? This is like no pressure. So even with these dull, blunt wood tools, you can kind of, you know, shape the wax as you will. Now this is going to make a little bit of a mess, so I recommend, you know, putting down some like paper towels, newspaper, anything like that before you get started. But the most important thing to remember is that you take away the material slowly and you want to rough out your design first, right? So like this is where the head's going to sit about midway through, and I have it kind of sketched out here, but this is just to kind of give me an idea. I know that all of this stuff is not going to be right up at the front. So you just kind of have to like think about the material you want to take away. And so that's why it's important to kind of sketch out from different angles in the beginning process. But I'm just going to start to slowly remove some material. It is pretty satisfying too, right? Now you don't want to remove it really fast, right? Because it's not like this stuff can't break, right? So just kind of slowly at a time, a little bit at a time. And I'm not necessarily going to carve the whole thing on this video, mainly for the sake of you guys probably don't want to watch me do that for 20 minutes, an hour, who knows. But just kind of peeling away slowly, right? So I'm trying to work down basically this chunk. I know that nothing's really going to go in this area except the head, which I'm going to carve a little bit at the top. I'm going to switch to my rounded carver here. And you can tell that this stuff is really easy to kind of manipulate away, so that's a good thing, is that it's really soft. So this isn't necessarily something that's, you know, this isn't a quick process. You're supposed to take your time, and this is a project too that we're going to be working on for a little bit of time. So I think you guys have about 2 weeks, and so this is one of the projects that's going to be in tangent with the woodworking project. So when it's not your days to be in the wood shop, this is something you can work on. And so just carving away slowly but surely, trying to map out the rough idea, right? And so in these bigger sections, you're kind of fine to like use a little bit more pressure, kind of eat away at the material. And it's going to go through a couple different phases, right? It's going to go through like a really kind of rough or ugly phase where it doesn't really look like anything. But then it's also going to, you know, once you start adding in those details, it's going to start to flesh out more. And then after that, you'll go in with either maybe sandpaper or some of the wood tools that we have here and really start to like flesh out more of the details. Just try to work down, starting to form the little top of the head here. Now, of course, like maybe your design that you picked from isn't, you know, maybe it's a little bit more bulky, right? So you might not have to remove as much material. Mine's pretty, I don't know, it's pretty in the round, so just try to build up that head space. And it can be, I know on the video, it's a little hard to see because it's all white. But as you work, you know, and you're getting closer to it, it's going to be easier for you to kind of navigate exactly what you want. And it helps, this needle tool too is like really good at kind of drawing out and kind of poking in, right? Because it's just as easy to kind of poke through this material with the needle tool. So if you prefer, you know, you don't have to use the ribbon tools as much. You can kind of really work the edges with the needle tool, get in there with a little bit more detail. Kind of see I'm kind of digging out more about where I want the head to be in that kind of center part. And so then I know when I'm doing that like all of this material through here can be removed. Before I get to the shoulder, of course, which is going to be kind of in this section, a little down from the head. So I'm kind of digging out around. Get some more of that out here. And you could kind of you heard it snap a little bit when I did that. And that's, you know, it's not necessarily a great thing, but it can be helpful if you do know that that's a lot of material that you want to remove, to kind of work the needle tool first and then kind of form it. You can see that this isn't going to be a quick process, right? So it really takes, it's helpful to kind of take time and think very basic geometric shapes first and then work to more specifics, right? Because it is miniature, which seems like a benefit, but actually it can be quite hard to kind of get small things to look exactly how you want them. I'm just going to show you a couple more techniques here. Don't want to kind of get into projects, so I'm trying to make sure that I don't take up too much time, right? So you guys can see a little bit that I'm starting to work away the head, and you can see where I've rounded out with the needle tool, just that kind of general head shape, and I'm kind of starting to flatten that out. The next part for me would be to like work in this dip of the shoulder. Now, I'm inspired by the sculpture that you guys see in the presentation. However, if things start to change and like it doesn't quite work out the way you want it to, or, you know, it doesn't have all of the details that the original sculpture has, that's not the end of the world, right? Because it's more about the learning process of doing a relief carving than having it be a perfect replica. So it's okay if it's a little bit more interpretation of, right? So just to kind of show you really quick. Now, here's the thing, is that like we're not really supposed to have any kind of open flame or hot things in the studio, but for the most part, you should be able to get that kind of refinement. But for instance, like if you're working from home and you have a need to kind of either smooth out, this is just a candle I have in my room, either smooth out something, and or if your piece falls apart as like you're almost finished and you want to work it back together, it's the benefit to using this kind of paraffin wax is that you can really just kind of heat up your metal tools and kind of really smooth out like any rough edges and kind of melt it back together, right? So it's not the end of the world if something breaks. You can always kind of like use your tools and kind of work in, right? You can see it heats up really fast and it can get that smooth kind of texture or surface. So that's an option too. However, this should be like a last resort, just for the safety of like everyone. You guys aren't supposed to necessarily have open flames in your dorm either. So, you know, it is paraffin wax. It can be kind of melted back down. But that is that kind of like precaution. If you are working from home and you do have like a candle, just make sure you're really, really safe and have like either a way to put it out really quickly to smother it, water, that kind of thing. But it is kind of good thing about using the wax is that you can put it back together, right? So it's not the end of the world. And of course, all of these, if you wanted to, and this is something you really get into, you could save this, kind of melt it down, pour it in a cup, and kind of remake a mold. So it's the benefits too to having this wax, unlike, we usually do this project in plaster, is that, you know, plaster you kind of have to start over, but wax you can just melt, remold it, and continue working, right? So just a kind of quick tutorial. So I'm going to keep working on this. I'll have an end result picture to kind of show. That's pretty much the gist. When it comes to cleanup, again, you can save these, but they're also fine to kind of go in the trash can. And it is like, especially this wax, it's a little, I don't want to say sticky, but it's like, you know, it kind of leaves a film on your finger. So just make sure you do put down something that you don't mind cleaning the wax off with, right? It's pretty easy. You can just kind of like brush it away. But yeah, paper towels, newsprint, that kind of thing. So good luck.